Welcome. If you're viewing this tape, there's a good chance that you've already met with me, and I have already given you an outline, a basic outline of the 4 steps of my process, which I refer to affectionately as CARPA, as in Carpe Diem, which is seize the moment, but I say Carpe Cognitio, which is Latin for seize or capture our cognitions or our thoughts. And CARPE also serves as a nice acronym, CARPE, capture, analyze, revise, practice, and do it every day. CARPE. So I probably haven't told you that because I usually don't tell people that in the first session, but it's a nice little acronym to remember the process. So the first step in the process I have likely explained to you, and I'm going to explain that again here and in this series of videos, really take you through all the steps. Now, if we haven't met, welcome anyway. I hope you find the tape to be valuable, and maybe you will give me a shout and I can explain more about it to you. So if you just happen to stumble upon this, hey, I hope you enjoy it as well. So, CARPA, the first step in the process is capture. Now, the actual technical term for capturing our thoughts is metacognition, but I like the term capture. That's what we're doing, or seizing, as in CARPA, right? Seize or capture the moment. Now, what are we capturing? Well, we're specifically capturing in the first step here those individual cognitions, which are thoughts and beliefs and ideas and assumptions and all those things that are happening when the unwanted emotion and or the unwanted accompanying behavior are happening. That's why people come to me, right? Because they're stressed. There's an emotion, stressed, depressed, anxious, frustrated. And the behaviors might be all kinds of things, right? Isolation or addiction, you name it. So people come to me because they have unwanted emotions and unwanted behaviors. So whenever that unwanted emotion is happening, we want to capture all of the cognitions that are going on in your mind during that emotion. And trust me, there are a lot. There are some in our conscious mind we'll notice right away, but there are a lot more that are in our semi-conscious or subconscious mind. So cognition is just the technical, psychological, scientific word for everything that goes on up here in our mind. That includes our thoughts and our beliefs and any assumptions we might make, predictions, rationalizations, excuses, and on it goes. The thing I want people to understand with this process, or this step of this process, is that we can't even begin to fix the problem without the accurate data. And the data you get through this capturing process. So I can't emphasize it enough. The better we do this first step, the better the whole process goes. That probably stands to reason, right? Now, cognition is as individual to a being as one's fingerprints, right? It would be a huge mistake to just take a guess to what someone's cognitive profile might be because I know the emotion. Wrong. They are so very different. So we have to get very, very accurate raw data. And that is not an easy thing to do. Be forewarned. Getting this data takes practice. For one thing, we've been trying to avoid thinking about these thoughts for most of our lives, probably. It is very counterintuitive to focus back in on the thoughts that are creating these negative emotions and ultimately negative behaviors. man, we've been trying to ignore them and just get past them, get distracted, go for a run, do anything else, have a drink, just to ignore these thoughts. But I'm telling you to go back and capture them. Now, for another thing, they're tucked away in our subconscious mind, many of them. And it can be quite tricky, admittedly, to retrieve subconscious thinking. Now, one problem is that so much of subconscious thinking is state dependent. Now, that means that these thoughts are generally only accessible when we are in that emotional state, the state that is causing those cognitions. Or the cognitions are technically causing the state of emotion, but that's when we can capture them. That's when they are closest to the surface. So it's absolutely imperative that we capture these thoughts in that emotional state, if possible, right in that moment. That's going to take some practice. We've got to train ourselves to stop in that moment and try and capture our cognitions, or at least as soon as we can get to a place where we can do that. Now, what we are capturing is called one's stream of consciousness. That's every thought that comes streaming in. Just as you think about streaming shows on Netflix, our thoughts come streaming into our minds. And I'm going to show you the most efficient, or talk right now about the most efficient and most effective method for doing that. First, there are a few others, but this is the most efficient. Pick up your phone. If you've got an iPhone, you hit the voice memo button. If you don't know where that is, I'm more than happy to tell you or show you. Give me a shout. Pretty easy to find. Just go to your app library and you'll find it. And walk outside or walk into another room and just start speaking the first thought that comes to your mind. And then the next one, and then the one right after that, and just keep spitting out every single thought as they materialize in your mind. Now, it's very important to not filter anything. Don't filter. And by that, I mean, don't skip any thoughts that you might think are irrelevant or silly or even kind of embarrassing. Those may be the very thoughts that become the difference makers in the end. So please don't skip anything. And as you are speaking, you'll have the experience where multiple thoughts probably will be materializing kind of in the background. And you want to kind of spit those out. Sometimes they stack up on you, and I do this every day, pretty much every day. And they stack up on me, and I'm spitting them out just as fast as I can talk. Now, the thoughts that have been fired up have been done so by a process called Hebb's law, or Hebbian plasticity, named after Donald Hebb. I won't go into the details, but he discovered the phenomenon. All you have to remember about it is the short, which is neurons that fire together wire together. So these neurons that have been fired in the creation of a thought tend to wire together to other adjacent thoughts, the other thoughts that you're thinking at that same time. So what this means is that when you activate that first thought, it's going to activate all the rest of the thoughts. Let me cancel this. It's going to activate all the rest of the thoughts that are in that sector. Now, technically, this is a synaptic network. Again, I'm not going to go into that here, but that's what we're talking about when we talk about these adjacent thoughts. They have been wired together. And if you're like most people, this experience is going to be kind of amazing. The thoughts start pouring out of your mouth, and you had no idea those thoughts were even there. And that's the nature of our subconscious thought. We're usually not aware that it's happening. Now, these thoughts are the same kinds of thoughts that happen when we drive a car. Now, when we first started to drive the car, right, first learned, we had to put a lot of conscious thought into taking our foot off of the brake, putting it on the gas, putting it back on the brake when we come to a red light, right? Now, we've done it so many times, we do it without even thinking about it. Well, actually, we are thinking about it, right? The cognitions are still happening, but we can move our foot from the gas to the brake when we see a red light without even breaking stride in the conversation we're having with our passenger. But the brain still has to perceive that the light turned red and still has to guide all of that thinking to get our foot from the gas to the brake. Now, be patient with this process. It might take a number of tries to get the hang of it. It usually does. It's like anything else that we attempt to learn. If we haven't done it before, we get better only with practice. So I encourage you to practice, to keep practicing, capturing your thoughts every chance you get. Every time you feel that emotion or any negative emotion. And we can apply this to positive emotions as well. But generally, people aren't coming to me to change the positive emotions, right? We'll talk way more about that, a lot more about that later. Now, I don't want you to go more than about 5 to 10 minutes. And the reason for that is because you're going to have plenty to process in 5 to 10 minutes. I have done this for over a decade, and I have counted. I'm kind of get a little bit anal about that stuff. I'm kind of a scientist when it comes to those kinds of things. So I've counted the thoughts, and I average about 50 to 60 thoughts in a 10-minute time frame. Yeah, that's a lot of thoughts that are coming out, right? And I believe if I do the math real quick, 60 into 10 minutes is about every 10 seconds, right? So I don't want you to do anything more with that tape in the first phase, the capturing process. Put it aside for now. We'll do the analysis, the second step, later. Resist the urge to listen to it right away. And there's a reason for that. I don't want you to listen to that tape until you are in a different state of emotion, when you have calmed down. My suggestion is to wait until the next day. That's what I do. I always wait until the next day. And it's amazing, at least for me, and I think it will be for you, what you hear on tape that next day. There are many times that I think, did I really say that? I mean, that's my voice. I know I said it, but I absolutely don't remember saying it. That is the nature of state-dependent thinking. And when you're listening back, then you can transcribe the audio. The transcription process is kind of like taking notes while you're listening to a lecture. And I would encourage you highly to type or dictate these notes into a bulleted list. Every separate cognition gets its own bullet point. This way, you can go back later. We can go back later and go through the notes and add sub-points to each of these bullet points. Now, the most efficient way I've found to do this transcription piece, is I will take my phone where the tape is, and I'll put my earbuds in so that the computer can't hear it, and then I'll use my MacBook. You can use another device like an iPad if you want, or some kind of a note book, but use something like that has a dictation application, and that way you can speak out these subpoints. Now, sometimes I do just type them. I'm a pretty fast typer, but usually I want to go a lot quicker than that, so I'm going to dictate them. If you do insist on writing them out, some people do, that's okay, but then type them somewhere else. I have, like I showed you, an iPhone, and I prefer to use the Notes application for this purpose. It's an awesome little application. You can drop the tape right into that note, and then you can take notes right in that same note. Or I can dictate on my MacBook while I'm listening to my tape, and both of those, the notes on both devices sync up. It's pretty cool. It's a sweet little process. And then you can take all of these notes and you can arrange them. So it's got a really nice folder and subfolder and sub-subfolder. You can make as many subfolders of subfolders as you want. It's a great way to start organizing all of this information. That is really the heart and soul of this process.